Welcome to Returning to Soul, a podcast for lawyers and other high achievers seeking deeper meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in their work and lives. My name is Jessie Brown. I practiced law for 15 years before becoming a coach and purpose guide for lawyers and other high achievers. I also work as a meditation teacher, a breathwork facilitator, sound healer, and forest bathing guide, and I facilitate retreats in Sedona, Arizona. So today I have a very special guest with us for our conversation, Michael Denmead, also known as Michael Tenderheart. And Michael and I met through the Purpose Guides Institute, where he's one of the leaders and I'm one of the students there, guides in training. And Michael also had worked for many years as a practicing therapist, a brain injury specialist, a wilderness adventure-based therapist, which I think is really fascinating. And as I mentioned, he's one of the leaders of the Purpose Guides Institute. And for nearly 42 years, he has been also serving as a firekeeper. So, Michael, welcome to our podcast today. And I'm really happy you're here.
Thank you for having me, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So, I'd love if you could just share, with our audience, we have a lot of people listening who are interested in pivoting from maybe a career in the first half of life that perhaps provided some more financial security, or they followed maybe a path that was laid out for them, perhaps by the culture or somebody else, family. And they're at that place where they're seeking more meaning, more purpose, more fulfillment to do work that feels more meaningful to them, more aligned with what matters to them, with what they value. And I'm curious if you could speak to your own personal story of, career evolution or the evolution of your service in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question and a great challenge, isn't it? Right, that many of us have faced or are facing. Yeah, earlier today when I was praying for the spirit helpers and ancestors to guide me for the right words to come through, I was also remembering that time of my life when I was a father raising a child and married and had a family, and also a professional. And I worked for a good majority of those professional years in nonprofits. And as a salaried person, you could put anywhere between 40, 60 or more hours a weekend, right? So I had to remember those moments of like, how did I walk my spiritual path in relationship to walking this middle world that we call it of work and career and family? And I remember a moment in my life when I was reflecting back. I remember when I was young, just starting my career, I was in my early 20s, and I was on a spiritual path, mostly from a Bushido or a martial arts entry, and also Zen, since I was a Zen practitioner in my early years at the university where I went for my undergrad. I remember when I was starting on this red road, they call it, the native spiritual path, I had a teacher who said to me, "Oh, you shouldn't go into this career. You should go be this firekeeper," because I was just getting trained as a firekeeper for the sacred ceremonies of Lakotas, and a particular Lakota elder, Grandfather Wallace Black Elk. And of course, I'm like, I just graduated not too long ago. I'm starting my career, and I'm like, no, no. So all these forces are grabbing at me. The overculture. You have to do this. You spent all this money. I put myself through undergraduate school, right? And then I was contemplating graduate school, and no, no, no. Well, I didn't leave this middle world and go follow just that red road path and be a firekeeper for Grandfather Wallace and other elders. Although I did when they came east, because I was living in Vermont at the time, serve as a firekeeper in those moments. And then I would have to transition from that world into the middle world of work and family.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always easy. I can say that. It wasn't always smooth, and there were forces pulling me both ways.
Mhm.
Yeah. Does that answer that question?
It does. And, for those of us, myself included, who feel that pull and who maybe struggle, I can speak for myself. I struggle a little bit with those transitions between what we might think of as two worlds, and integration, from one world into the next. So I'm curious if you could speak to what you found helpful for those of us that are in that place.
Mm, that's an awesome question. Um, yeah, I think first always allowing myself to feel the feelings of the struggle,
Mm,
right? Allowing space.
mm,
You know, I know you're akin to this work and you bring it in the world, with parts work, Richard Schwartz's work on parts therapy. But in some cultures that I've been in, native cultures, they would call these little spirit helpers that whisper in our ears and give us feelings in our body. And if we don't make space for them, if I don't make space for them, they might take over my bus,
mm,
right? And they have at times, right? Why? Because they were trying to protect me, keep me safe,
mhm,
make me do the middle world thing, right? To get the accolades, the attaboy, nice job, you know. And that's not to say those things are bad things,
mhm,
but were they my full yes? So when these feelings would come, these transitions and the struggle in the transition, I learned how to start just being with these little spirit helpers, again, whispering in my ear, giving feelings in my body. And I would just grieve sometimes,
mhm,
grieve the struggle, that
mhm,
why does it have to be so hard? Why can't we live? And you and I were speaking before we jumped on here about this very thing.
mhm,
Why can't we live in a more soul centric culture where we're all encouraged and supported to be our most soulful self, our most spiritually alive self for the world, right? So I would grieve, and I spend a lot of time spent and currently spend a lot of time in nature.
mhm,
I go on prayer walks and I talk to all the beings, the tree people. I can see some of them out my window currently. Our creeks are up here in mid Missouri, so we're kind of stuck here. Well, stuck's not the right word. We're here for now until the creeks come down, right? But I talk to these beings just like I'm talking to you,
mhm,
the tree people, Miniwachoni, the sacred waters, right? The winged ones that we have so many bird people here, different populations. And I tell them what's in my heart. I
mhm,
tell them, oh, this is so hard to be in this middle world. I have to go beyond this screen. I'd rather be with Jesse and ceremony and other people, not on a screen.
yeah.
How can we do this better? Right.
Mhm,
So I think to answer your question, it's just I go with a humble heart and I just speak out loud. And they say this is important. I got this from some of my elders, my native elders, that when you pray, just say it out loud so we don't get lost in our head
mhm,
swimming around with trying to find the right words. Because when I speak out loud, I may stumble. I may not say, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to do. But then I find my place, my path with those words by speaking out loud from this very humble place.
mhm,
I need help.
mhm,
How do I walk in between these worlds, this middle world and this spiritual life in the spiritual, right?
mhm.
Um, I hope that helps answer that question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. It's a beautiful answer. And I think it highlights the reality that there's no like quick fix. We're not going to have a hack. There's not a life hack here. This is it's humility, it's prayer, it's just being very authentic. And yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that. And since we are both affiliated with this Purpose Guides Institute, and facilitate this purpose discovery program. And I know some of the people who listen to this podcast are interested in this program or who are currently in it. I'd love to take a moment, if it's okay with you, to talk a little bit about, the program, the intent. And so could you share with us, who you think this program is best suited for, who might, the timing, the type of person who might benefit the most from this program?
Yeah. Yeah, you're asking a really important question about readiness,
Mhm,
right? Are we ready? How do we know we're ready for some deeper dive
mhm,
into what's calling us, what greater is calling us, right? And I don't know if I have a specific like recipe that might say like, well, if you check these boxes, you're ready for something like this or
yeah.
something similar to Purpose Guides Institute, the purpose discovery process. But I think it's more a longing,
Mm,
like there's this feeling in your body or feelings in your body of like, oh, I know there's something more nourishing, more soul nourishing out there,
mhm,
right? So what I try to do when people ask, should I join a program like this?
mhm,
And this is built into it, so you know this very well, Jesse, that if it's just another thing, another spiritual or program of self-improvement, that's what I'm looking for. That's not this.
mhm,
And sometimes, and I know we've had these conversations, people are often shocked because and then they realize, oh, this is something different,
mhm, mhm,
right? If you're having the questions or the longing in the questions of like, I know there's something greater there. I know there's something I want more out of life
mhm.
than just this 9 to 5 and the what I call, and I might offend some people, I call the great American scream.
Yeah.
It's the rushing, rushing, rushing for accolades and more salary and bigger titles. You know, I felt the longing my whole life.
Mhm,
I felt the call for something greater,
mhm,
right? Even growing up in a dysfunctional adopted family that I grew up in, I like there's something more, there's something better out there. And I did chase the accolades, right? I did get the awards, you know, and something was still missing.
mhm,
That's the question. And
mhm,
we can only be authentic and true with ourselves. Like, what there's something more I'm seeking,
mhm,
or something more is seeking us,
mhm,
right? To show up in the world with our gifts, right? Because we know when you look around the world, there's a lot of not so good things happening, wars and famine,
mhm,
right? The environmental stuff happening. And yet our heart wants something different,
mhm,
right? Our soul wants something different. And the only way that I know is for us to spend time being with that,
mhm,
right? Either by ourselves in nature and or maybe with, guidance from someone who has some skillful means to help us look deeper, to mirror back to us, reflect back to us our own words, our own longing.
mhm.
And then we find our readiness.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you so much. I love hearing about your own experience because when I think back, like I had a friend, a childhood friend who said, you were always the kid at the sleepovers who was like staying up all night talking about the meaning of life and all of this, struggling at like 10, 11, 12 years old. And we were all like, can we just go to sleep, And so I resonate with that longing, as long as I can remember. Um, even predating that. And then I also chased the accolades for many years and was driven by the desire for financial security, having come from, financial insecurity as a child. That was a main goal of mine for many years. So I really appreciate you sharing your story. And I wonder, this idea of being with this longing and almost that the longing is the path or shows us the way. Um, in my experience, maybe requires making some space in our life, even in our calendar, just literal time and mental, maybe emotional, like just inner space and practically in our life. And a lot of folks I talk to and I work with struggle to carve out space. So, could you speak to that? What you think the role of space, maybe the struggle, how to carve out more space?
Yeah. 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 It's beautiful. Because we're the ones that fill it, right?
Mm.
We're the ones that fill our space. And so, we have to kind of be a little honest here, right? I had to be a little honest. Like, well, I said yes to taking on that new project. I said yes to being the director of that new program or new study. I said yes. Oh, oh. So I think self-reflection is an important piece here. Not to be hard on ourselves, because we're doing it for other motivations, right? Those little spirit helpers whispering, well, if you say yes to that, then you'll look really good and someone will give you an award or pat you on the back, right?
Mhm.
Of course, because we want that. We want to be seen in the world and heard, and we want to be recognized.
Mhm.
So yeah, just that awareness of like, oh, am I saying yes because I'm chasing something and not honoring what my soul is really asking,
Mhm.
right? And if I'm make a little space, let's start with a little space, right? We're not talking a lot of space,
Mhm.
just a little. If I make a little space. So what I started to do, especially during the longer summer days, I would get up at first light,
Mhm.
right? And I would go out in the woods near my home and I would sit, right? So first light in Vermont, maybe during the summers might have been around 5 a.m., right? I didn't have to be at work until 8. So at least I got like an hour outside listening, right? Being on the earth, being away from now, early in my career, I'm going to shock some people. We didn't have cell phones.
Wow. Yes.
So there wasn't that temptation to have this little box with me all the time, right?
Hmm.
But we did have computers eventually and phones and the demands of life. But just getting out away from
Hmm.
this thing, this thing, right? That allows a connection to some incredible beings, right? In nature, right? So, and if you don't have a lot of time, or if you don't have vast nature around you, and you go spend time with a tree person, just sit by this tree, put your back against
Hmm.
this tree person, right? And lean back and feel them and just be, right? So even if it's small increments,
Hmm.
make the space 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That'll feed the longing, right? And it may also feed the struggle, but
Hmm.
the struggle is important here, right? The struggle is important. So yeah, make a little space. I had to do that in the beginning.
Me too. Yeah, it's still something that's a big theme for me in my life. And I just what you just said about the struggle is important reminded me. I have a client who is a purpose discovery client, and when she showed up to her session recently, she was very much in the struggle and kind of just like I'm at a breaking point, and I was like inside like yes. This is good, but it's hard to say that, and when you're in it it doesn't feel that way. So I'm curious if you could speak to that. And this program is described as being intentionally destabilizing to the ego, we might say. So could you speak to that and the struggle and the benefit of that destabilization?
Yes, yes, yeah. Well, it has to, right? It has to. One of our teachers, guest teachers in Purpose Guides Institute, as you know, is Bill Plotkin, right? And he writes most beautifully about this struggle, right? Like, you know, the the caterpillar has to completely dissolve to become a butterfly,
Mhm.
right? And to think that your body as you know it, your ego as you know it, has to completely dissolve to form into something more beautiful, right?
Mhm.
Like, oh, how do they do that?
Mhm.
Right? How do they do that? And we also know that the caterpillar, at least, from biology, the caterpillar, right, voraciously eats, for a period of time before it goes and spins the cocoon, right? So is that like our grabbing for all the things that we have to do? And is that necessary? I think it might be.
Mm.
Um, the disillusion isn't comfortable. It isn't easy,
Mhm.
right? It's, you know, I mean, I'll share, part of my disillusion to walk more fully this way is I had to have a serious health crisis when I was 40 years old, when it lasted from 40 to 42. I had a very rare form of thyroid cancer,
Mm.
right? And had to go through some really intense stuff and even give a prognosis, right? About how long I might live if I choose this medical path versus this medical path. But what it did was make me go like, oh, I need to take some time here.
Mm.
I need to really think about and pray about and be with those spirit helpers and ancestors that guide me, because there's something greater calling me here,
Mhm.
you know? I mean, you know, that was over 40 years ago,
Mm.
right? But I chose to listen. I
Mm.
chose to go like, oh, I need to do something a little different. It doesn't mean I made a radical change. I didn't leave my family or leave my job,
Mhm.
but I refocused. It refocused me, I should say, of, oh, how do I walk this way within this middle world of things?
Mhm.
Right? It focused me.
Yes. And, um, it seems that's the case for many of us. There's a help. Thank you for sharing that. And, that is profound. And I'm sure that was a very difficult experience. And it reminds me of how many of us need some type of a crisis before, and you were already on a spiritual path, as you said earlier. So it's not, but there was some depth or some calling for still something more for you in your life. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I see this so often that in midlife, there's something that happens. It could be a health crisis or the dissolution of a marriage or a career crisis or something else. Um, but occasionally, like I know in our Purpose Guides training program, there are young folks who come to this work in their 20s, early 20s, and I'm amazed. I'm like, what's that like? And I'm curious what you think about that because I'm just like, how do you come to this without having a crisis?
Yeah. Well, I think the universal soul is evolving,
Mm.
right? And so, as we look around, some of the structures that may have been there when I was younger aren't so available to young people,
Mm.
right? I mean, there's other things that are available, and there's more connectivity in the world through computers and through cell phones and internet, right? That may not have existed when I was a young person as much. But I think that, yeah, the universal soul is evolving, right? We as a species, meaning two-legged, five-fingered ones, right? Human beings, we're being asked to step up in these times, right? And start to be more relational. Like, we know native people, you know, are way more relational. They don't see um, tree people as they see them as people,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
They don't see them as commodities,
Mhm.
right? At least from my experience of being with native people of these lands and other lands, they don't see it as something to be consumed to create more wealth for myself,
Mhm.
right? Now that's not to say I never cut a tree person down,
Mhm.
because I used to heat with wood in my home in Vermont, but I would lay down a blessing and ask, and I would look very carefully. I just didn't randomly slash and cut, right? When I would pick things out of my garden, I would give gratitude for their lives, for feeding me and my family and
Mhm.
my friends, whoever came to dinner, right? So there's a way of being relational that is so important,
Mhm.
in the Lakota language, they say, "Oho mitakwe o yasin," which means all my relations, because they believe, they see we are part of, in relationship with all these other beings.
Mm-hmm.
And we share this earth with them.
Mm-hmm.
They have a right to exist too, just like you and I,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the greater consciousness, the greater soul is moving people, and particularly young people, particularly young people. They're going like, I don't, I see this, I don't have the same opportunities maybe, and there's got to be something more.
Mm-hmm.
It's all mysterious to me. I don't understand fully how it all works, but I trust that there is a greater mystery at play that is asking all of us to step up, particularly in these times.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What you were just describing about cultivating this sense of relationship with all beings, that may be new to some of us who have not been as exposed to Native Indigenous wisdom. And for me, I did forest training a couple of years ago, to become a forest bathing guide, and that started exposing me a little bit to this. And then in the Purpose Guides program, the Purpose Discovery program, the Soul Quest was very much that for me, spending 8 hours out on the land, fasting with no distractions. I really did feel much more connected to all of life. And we know that this is like a mini version of the full Vision Quest, but I'm curious if you could speak to anybody who's interested in the Purpose Discovery program. The Soul Quest is a big piece of that, and to what the benefit might be of doing something like that.
Yes. Well, you asked an earlier question about, how to make space, right? So that we can listen with different ears, right? The ears of our heart. We can sense and see with different eyes, right? And when we allow, the combination of the program is a lot of preparation to go out on the land for those 8 hours, right? And to be in communion with, right, the more than human world. And it's in that place that we start to experience, especially given a length of time, where we start to go, we work through all the mind stuff, right? All the self-talk, all the stories. And it's not to say people might not get stuck there. They might need more time, more space, right? But at least it's a stepping off, right? I told you, part of my early career, I was an adventure-based therapist, and so we had this thing called the flea jump, and it was on a ropes course, and so you're tethered to a rope, right, to a wire going across, and you have to jump, right, sometimes 40, 60 feet, 80 feet in the air to this other platform. Well, it's you can make it, but the mind starts telling you stories, right? And the hardest thing is to step off, is to take the leap, right? And what the Soul Quest does is give you a smaller version, a watered down version of a true, fast, right? What they call Humblature. It's a watered down version, but it gives you a little bit of a step off that platform of safety, right? Into the unknown and the mystery. And to start to use our sensory selves, intelligences, to perceive other things, right? Like, some people might think I'm crazy, but to have a dialogue with a tree person, or if a toad comes hopping up to your circle, or a deer, or anything else, a winged one, that, hey, how are you? I'm Brother Michael Tenderheart, and who are you? Like, I'm here on your land. So grateful that you can allow me to sit here with you. I wonder if you have something to teach me. Right? There's this humility again. One of the greatest forces in nature, with Lakota called the Wakinyan, the thunder beings, right? If you need a dose of humility, go out in a thunderstorm.
Yes.
I'm humbled every time. Like, oh, you could smote me with one strike of your breath, right? And the river is rising. I could see it over there. Iniwachoni, the sacred waters could rise up and swallow me up. right? I'm not all that.
Mhm.
But if I'm in relationship with, and I do my best, I'm not perfect at it, I do my best to be in relationship with these greater forces in nature. And this is what indigenous people have used for millennia to guide their decisions as tribes, their decisions in their cultures. And I've listened for nearly 40 years of my life to these prophecies and these teachings from different native elders. And I believe the thing that'll bring balance back to the world is us using these ancient technologies. And we've borrowed a few of them, right, in Purpose Guides Institute. It's been handed down for us to utilize these ancient technologies that have guided people for millennia
Mhm.
for the more modern times that we're in.
Yes. And one of those ancient technologies that I was introduced to through the program in a new way was prayer. So I had a certain relationship to prayer based on having gone to a Christian church 25 years ago. And then I really was turned off for various reasons and became very interested in meditation for about 20 years. And wasn't always consistent as a meditator, but if I did a spiritual practice, it tended to be that. And I was a little like put off by the concept of prayer. So you actually introduced me to a new way of engaging with prayer. And now it is part of my life. And I think it's so incredibly supportive. So I'm curious for someone who may have some baggage around the concept of prayer, how they might be able to incorporate this ancient technology.
Yeah, I love your question here. Yeah. Well, I too, I was raised in the adopted family that I was adopted into, raised in Catholicism,
Mm.
right? And so I was exposed to prayer, and I was even an altar boy and a volunteer pallbearer, and contemplated, boy, do I want to be a priest? And when I got exposed to native cultures and saw how they prayed and who they prayed to, right? I started to wonder, there's certain elements, right? A certain recipe to prayer that I think is important. Now, don't take my word. I'm not an expert, right? But I've studied this for, over, gosh, most of my life.
Mhm.
And there's certain key ingredients that I think are important. We already mentioned one or two of them. One of them is humility, right? Like, I'd love to do a poll and find out how many people demanded something in a prayerful way and got it, right? How many people humbled themselves and asked for help. Now, I know I've seen people pray for like specific things. Like, I personally can't do that, right? Like, even people will ask me, because, I'm a firekeeper, and part of being a firekeeper, I was told I need to light a fire on the new and the full moons, the equinoxes and the solstices, if I'm not in a ceremony, like in a Nippy sweat lodge ceremony, or keeping fire for a Hamblecha vision quest. But the prayer, right, is that I have to come humbly,
Mhm.
and I usually announce myself, in the Nippy, in the lodge, we announce ourselves in the prayer round. I say, hey, this is Michael Tenderheart, your grandson, here praying for the people, right? So there's this humility piece, right? The other piece is that we often forget in prayer is to be grateful. Like, we might ask for something, like somebody will ask me, can you pray for my grandfather? My grandfather just got diagnosed with cancer. Sure. But I don't say, hey, can you cure, I'll use words, Tenkashila or Unchi, that's creator or mother, grandmother. Um, I don't ask for specific things. I ask, hey, there's a beloved here, a granddaughter who asked prayers for their grandfather who got diagnosed with cancer. Can you bring your best medicine for them? I don't know what the best medicine is, right? So I'm asking, and I'm grateful that this grandfather has been in this young woman's life and is so dear to her. I'm so grateful that they've had the time that they have, right? So there has to be gratitude in the prayer, at least in my experience, for the movement, the energy, the vibration of the prayer to move out, right? So humility and gratitude are important in my understanding. And then also consistency.
Mm.
Like, you know, we, like I see people, what do they say? How does that old saying go? Something about tragedy makes everybody prayerful or something, right?
Mm.
I can't remember the exact saying. Somebody will find it. But if that's the only time we pray, right? When we're scared out of our boots, or something tragic happens, right? Eh, do the spirit helpers help? Do the ancestors really listen? Because we're not, again, in consistent and right relationship with them,
Mm.
right? So I pray every day. I go on long prayer walks. I pray early in the morning around the fire pit, and put in tobacco, which is a sacred herb for Native people of these lands. And I put that into the pit so that when the fire is lit, all those prayers will be lifted up, right? Um, and I go on prayer walks. If somebody asks me, then when I'm going to a nipi, to lodge, or going to ceremony, we'll pray for those people. We'll hold those prayers, right? And so we have to be in consistent relationship. We make a spirit plate, an offering for the spirit helpers and the ancestors of food,
Mm.
right? Because we want to feed them. We want to say, we're so grateful. You're come in and help us out here. And here's a little offering, a little humble offering, right? So there's a relationship here again. We're back to relationships, right? You know, I have a friend. He and I went to college together as undergrads, and he's retired now. But he was a anthropologist, and he went to Greece because his family was of Greek heritage. I grew up in a city in Ohio where it was mostly Italian Greeks in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and we grew up together. And anyway, he studied anthropology, and being a scientist, I asked him one day. This was years ago. We don't speak that often anymore. I don't even know where he's at these days. Um, but I asked him, I said, do you think your people, the Greek people, one time truly believed that the gods and goddesses walked amongst them?
Mm.
And he was thoughtful. Remember, he's a scientist. He
Mm.
said, yes, I believe that was true. I believe my people, there was a day when the gods and goddesses walked amongst my people. And I said, well, I have another fresh question, Carl. I said, why did they leave?
Mm.
And he was very thoughtful. And he said, because we stopped being in relationship with them. We thought we didn't need them anymore as humans, that we can do it. We can be our own gods and goddesses. We can. And I was like, huh.
Mm.
So they lost their relationship with, and asking for help and giving offerings, and being in that deeper spiritual relationship with. So to me, that's all prayer. From
Mhm.
your question, like am I consistent in my relationship with these beings,
Mm.
the greater forces, whatever you call them, to pray to, right? Like I use different words than you might use, Jesse, and your audience will use different words, or maybe they're from one of the four primary Abrahamic religions, right? So who knows? I just know that I have to use this ancient technology to evoke a deeper relationship with
Mm.
that which supports me.
Beautiful. Thank you. You know, as you're speaking and you're talking about prayer and humility, I was reminded of, I'm going to grab this here. This is a bone whistle. Um, so I have this because you introduced me in the program. I was in a small group that you led, and you introduced me to this concept of being a hollow bone, and it became part of something that I pray for regularly. So I'm curious if you could just explain this concept briefly for
Mm.
anybody who, like me, maybe this is new.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of my elders once said to me, when I was being trained as a firekeeper, he said, be a good hollow bone, a good empty bone, not a bone head. I probably didn't fully appreciate what he was saying to me at that moment, but now, many, many years later, I understand, I think. We've used the word here soul, and we use that in purpose guides. In native traditions, they might just call it spirit, right? Something's moving through us, something wants to move through us. But we're often occluded with our own thoughts, our own ego, our own busyness, right? We don't make space again,
Mm-hmm.
hence your previous questions, to allow something greater to come through,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right. So whether, like you also mentioned meditation, in meditation, we quiet the mind, right? But it also allows space for something different to happen, something else to come through, right? So, you know, being a hollow bone is, how am I preparing? And that's really the work. Sometimes people will challenge me, and my sacred companion, Carolyn, will challenge me. She goes, well, you hardly ever make any notes and make an outline. And I always laugh. I'm like, well, I do jot down maybe a thought or two so that I stay somewhat focused, but I spend most of my time praying to my spirit helpers, my well and wise ancestors, help me prepare so that what needs to come through, the right words for the people, right? You know, what we do, at least in my understanding, why I still exercise and try to stay healthy and eat right and meditate and I pray and I do these ceremonies, is not for me, but it's for the next 7 generations of people, human and other than human people, right? The two-leggeds and the four-leggeds and the mammals and the creeper crawlers and the stone people and the plant people and the winged ones and the swimmers, the elemental beings, and Unchi, Unumaka, our mother that we all live on, right? Like, if I don't do my best for your children, right, and my grandchildren and those coming after, like, that's why I do this. And so I need to be a good hollow bone. I need to spend more time preparing myself to be hollow, not making notes. No offense to Carolyn or anyone else, right?
Yeah.
I just need, please guide me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's ways of doing this. You mentioned meditation, you mentioned prayer, right? Fasting. I would invite people in who might observe this. Take a technology fast for 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at your phone or your computer. The world will keep spinning, right? The world will keep spinning. Let people know, so they don't think you've fallen off the planet or something. But let them know, I'm going to take a 24-hour fast from technology. I'm not going to watch anything. I'm not going to get on these boxes. I'm not going to answer any phone calls. I'm going to go sit without this technology.
Mm-hmm.
Why? To be a little more hollow,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can sense with those sensory perceptions, eyes, ears, right? Smell, taste, touch, intuition,
Mm-hmm.
something else. Make some space. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's one of the gifts of that soul quest that I experienced was technology fast. It was in addition to fasting from food, that was part of it. And as you said in the beginning, there is a lot of mental chatter and a lot of stuff going on. And as we know, these devices create dopamine hits and a little bit of an addiction. So we may feel withdrawal, which is real. But we're not going to suffer and be harmed. We can just observe that what's happening within ourselves and pray. It's an opportunity as we feel that maybe that craving to check the device, check our text or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And say it out loud. Oh, I'm struggling. I wish I had my phone with me to call somebody or check something or watch something.
Yeah.
I'm struggling here. Right.
Yeah.
Let whatever you pray to know that you're struggling. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. So, Tenderheart, as we come to a close, there's one story that I know of yours that I would love for you to share with our audience. So this is the story of where you lit a sacred fire, and I want you to tell the story, but it has to do with your professional accolades.
Oh, okay. I'm um I'm I'm getting the sense it might be the story where I burned some of those accolades.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, I've gotten awards over the years as a professional, and I even got like professional of the year for the Brain Injury Association for the state of Vermont from the governor, right? I had to go to the governor's mansion in Montpelier, Vermont with some folks and get this award, right? I was at a big conference once and I got this award. Um, and I didn't even know they're sitting there talking about this is hilarious. They were talking about I'm at this conference, big, a conference, and they're talking about this person who's going to get this award, and they're naming off all his achievements. And I'm going, wow, this guy's done a lot of similar things that I've done. I'm sitting there, and then and people are, sitting at this round table with me. There's like 8 of us, and some of the people at the table knew that it was me. I didn't know. I was totally shocked, right? Well, wow, that guy's done a lot of the same things I did. And then I got this big award. Well, like most of us, we may hang those on our office walls or, in our home office or whatnot. They eventually they hung there for a while. Then eventually I took them down and I put them in a special box, and they've sat in that box for, probably 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, not too long ago, I said, well, you know what? I got to make some more space. I got to be a better hollow bone. I'm going to go through some of this stuff. And I took every single one of those awards, right? That wasn't have some sort of plastic on it, or because some of them were plaques and stuff. And I made a fire. And I said to those that I pray to, will you take these from me? Mm-hmm. They were important at a one time for me to exist in the world. They're not so important now. I want to totally let them go so that whatever else needs to come through, mm-hmm. That I can have more hollowness, mm-hmm. to allow to come through. What is being asked of me now, mm-hmm. in this time, in this auspicious times that we live in? Mm-hmm. And so one by one, I put them in the fire and watched them burn and let them go. And I might have remembered when I got the award, or remembered the people associated with it, or the study that I did was working with when they gave me this award. And I just let it go. Mm-hmm. And I even grieved some. I know there was some tears involved, because it's hard to let go of, that who we were once was, mm-hmm. right? Because there's some affection for that part of us. Mm-hmm. But I was no longer acting that part in the world. I needed to let them fully go.
Mm. Thank you. I love this story so much because, it reminds me a client of mine who a career coaching client, left her law firm job and she chose to become a lawyer. Actually, it was her mother's dream to become a lawyer, and English was not her mother's first language. And she had tried to take the bar exam in California 9 times and failed, her mother.
Wow.
So my client decided to become a lawyer in honor of her mother. And she tried, and it just wasn't a good fit for her. For years, she had health issues, other challenges. It just is not a fit. So we worked together, and she chose to leave that career. And so this is exactly what we were talking about last week, is this groundlessness, or, time of uncertainty, where she doesn't have a new job lined up. She has some savings and she's figuring it out. But and another thing that comes to mind as I listen to your story, I'm speaking at a summit called Rest to Rise for lawyers and other folks. And today is actually my presentation it's already gone live. And it's on what is this woman who is hosting the summit. She identified 6 types of rest for professionals. And one of the types she identified, she called it identity rest. So I chose that to speak on because I thought it was fascinating. And it really is what you're talking about a little bit. It's like, what does it look like to let go of this identity, to hold it a little more loosely, if we feel ready to even let it go completely? Like, what might be possible?
Beautiful. Yeah. And there might be a little ritual or a ceremony that we're being called to let it go, right? Because that gives it more energy, more importance of, like, no, I'm not just going to, throw these in the shredder, right? You could put them through the shredder, but as you do it, how are you doing? What little ritual are you doing it to really sever so that whatever new can come in? So I love how you were called to that.
Thank you. I know when I decided to not practice law anymore, I wrote a letter as sort of a ritual. This was a few years ago, to my law career, honoring all the gifts, because of course there were many gifts as well, and all the things I learned about myself and everything else, and a lot of relationships that came through that career. So honoring that. And then we have a mutual friend who, I think he shared this on this podcast, Jonathan Lowsley, who actually held a funeral when he decided to end his career of 20, 25 years and pivot to something new. So I do think it's really beautiful having some type of a ritual or ceremony to honor this portion of our life, this career, and whatever it provided for us, and then make space for what's new.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
important for that transition.
Yeah. Well, Tenderheart, this has been such an amazing conversation, so rich, and I can't wait to listen to it again because you said so much that was just very profound. So, for any listeners who would like to learn more about you and your work, I know you're out on the land a lot and not in online as much these days, but where could they find you or connect with you?
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's my commitment these days, right? That's my commitment is to help people find their more true self that wants to be a gift to the world. And so, yeah, they can feel free to email me. And I still have my old email from my old martial arts days. It's
Mm.
truewarrior63 at gmail.com. So just like the words, no spaces, TRUEWARRIOR 63 at gmail.com. And I usually get back to people hopefully within 48 hours, especially unless I'm off at the ceremony. But yeah, I really want to support people. You know, it's like the new shoes being asked to wear in my 63rd trip around the sun is these shoes called elder shoes. Um, and I guess I'm allowing myself to feel the comfort of them more and more. You know, because I had elders who guided me, you know, and I don't even like to imagine who I would be if I didn't have them,
Mm.
especially some of my native elders. Because I like how I'm walking in the world, and and I like the relationships I'm forming. And so, yeah, if people need support, you know, I know you're a great support for people, you know, especially professional people who are trying to walk these ways and walk in the middle world as well. Um, so I hope some more people reach out to you as well.
Thank
And
you.
and I always tell people if they reach out and if it doesn't feel like a good fit, you know, we always refer to other people. We will help find the right people that you resonate with to help support you on your path.
Yes, that's right. Well, we will put your email in the show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time to spend this time with us. It's so valuable. And I know, yes, your presence in my life has been very impactful and continues to be. And I do see this need in the world for true elders, like a enormous need. And so many of us don't have this. So I just want to thank you. Um,
Mm.
and to all our listeners, thank you for spending this time with us. This is Returning to Soul. If you found this episode helpful, please rate this podcast, subscribe, share it with a friend who might benefit. And we're so glad you're here. Until next time, be well.
Hi, everyone. Blessings.